Where are all you Mike Gill fans? Hit that like button. We get a couple comments on the side. Gill is great. Gill spitting facts. Well, then hit the like button. We'll ride Mike Gill's coattails here on Birds 365. All right, Mikey, I sucked up to you well enough. How you doing after that Super Bowl loss?
I've moved on to the Phillies already. See, I got my Philly shirt on. Yeah, I see you did too, Jody. Pitchers and catchers tomorrow, man. I'm a baseball
NFL Network. It may be. Oh, I got the Phillies hat on. Yeah. You're right. Thank you. Yeah. My bad.
Yeah. Pitchers and catchers. Yeah. Philadelphia
Pitchers and catchers tomorrow. I'm a baseball guy at heart. I've already got my spring training trip planned. But no, I mean, listen, I think I thought Philadelphia was going to win the game, and I didn't think it would be particularly close. And quite frankly, I had 35-21. The Eagles scored 35, but they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. Now, their defense only really gave up about 24, so I was pretty close. But the things you can't account for, something that didn't happen all season long, a turnover. I mean, they didn't turn the ball over all year. Whenever they did, they lost. And they turned the ball over from the guy who probably had the best game of anybody on the field, but that turnover changed the complexion of the whole game.
Yeah, but and I went down this road last night. Yeah, but after he turned it over, they scored the next 10 points, and they walked into halftime with a 10-point lead. So that, to me, diminishes the magnitude of the turnover. You had a 10-point lead at half. Come out, get a stop to start the second half. Put the Jalen fumble in your rearview mirror. You win the game. Defense couldn't do that.
Yeah, but by the way,
listen, the defense doesn't get out. The defense doesn't get absolved here, but the difference really is, Jody, and you're right. The point is they fumble that ball. It's 3rd and 1. They're at the 50 or 30, 47, somewhere around midfield. If they go down and score, it's now 21-7. They got to stop on the next possession, and then they scored again. Now you're up 24-7 at half. Your defense has a lot more room for error against the best coach and best quarterback in this league right now.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talk about it all the time, Mike. I mean, I thought it was interesting. I told Jody I'd like to look at the PFF grades after. Like my thought after watching the game was the difference was what you mentioned. The Eagles typically get a play or two from the defense, whether it's a turnover, sack, big loss at a key situation. Maybe it's a Son Reddick strip sack. They didn't get that. If I told you before the game, what did Patrick Mahomes threw for 188 yards? The Eagles gave up 340 total yards of offense to the mighty Kansas City Chiefs. If I told you that before the game, would you have taken that? And everybody's like, "Oh, this defense is terrible. This defense is terrible." Now, look. In the second half, you got to get a stop. There's got to be a sack. There's got to be something. The difference between the Eagles in Super Bowl 52 and the Eagles in Super Bowl 57, the defense made a play in 52. It didn't in 57.
Yeah, and all year for 20 weeks, this defense is predicated on if you're going to get long drives, 9, 10, 11, 12 play drives, somewhere in that drive, you're going to make a mistake. And you're not going to be able to get 9, 10, 11, 12 play drives multiple times. And you might get one, and it might be early in the game. You get a 9-play drive to start the first quarter off and you score. But after that, you got to go on long drives without making a mistake to beat this team. Well, the Chiefs made no mistakes, essentially, in that second half. Look, the Eagles, I just went back and watched the tape again before I came on with you guys. They had a miscommunication in the secondary between Maddox and Slay. That seems pretty obvious. Yeah. They both went rocking and rolling to the same direction. Yeah. So did they call the right defense, or did the players miscommunicate? They ran a 0 blitz. When the hell do you see them 0 blitz on the goal line? And Maddox thought he was a part of the blitz, which he wasn't. And then his area is vacated wide open. So Gannon, almost what you can accuse him of was Why did you try to do something in this game that you hadn't done all year?
Yes. The adjustments, people, have driven me crazy, Mike Gill, since the Super Bowl ended. You got to make adjustments. You got to make adjustments. Ironically, he did what he typically doesn't do.
Right.
And the adjustments didn't work ultimately at the end of the day. But you bring up miscommunication, execution is not adjustments. People look at those wide open touchdowns. They were both miscommunication. Jody, you and I have been talking about this all year. When you play the Fangio defense, you better stink and communicate in the back end.
Well, listen,
because
John and Jody, one of the things with Minnesota runs the same defense. Why were they? They can't communicate. You see them constantly miscommunication in that
blown
Minnesota
coverage
secondary.
after blown coverage, and you see it, and guys are running wide open. And I talked about it all year. If you don't communicate, it's going to look bad. And on the biggest stage, they didn't communicate, and it looked bad. That's not, they don't have a defensive coordinator that makes adjustments. Every defensive coordinator in the NFL makes adjustments. Every single one. You're not looking for a guy who makes adjustments. I put on Twitter, I joked, sources say Nick Sirianni is looking for a defensive coordinator that makes adjustments. People thought I was being serious, Mike. I at some point, I can't help people anymore. It's driving me crazy.
Well, listen. Yeah, and in this particular game, they give up 7 points in the first half, the defense, and the funny part is you didn't make adjustments in the second half. Well, they gave up 7 points in the first half. I might have been doing something right, that I would have tried to keep doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
I gave up 7 points. Again, I hate to belabor this point, but it has to be brought up. That field was an absolute atrocity, and I think it was a huge factor in this game. It's a shame. But in the call, people want to talk about the call and the adjustments and this. I never saw somebody after the game, Jody. A guy tweeted out the slip stats. The Eagles slipped on 33% of the plays, and Kansas City slipped on like 19%. Now, why Kansas City slipped less, I don't know. But who the hell is tallying slippage on the field in the Super Bowl?
And analytics wonk, and God bless them, and thanks for it so we can add it into our analysis of the game. The only way I think the Eagles were affected more was Reddick. Yeah. Reddick is a speed guy who lives with going around the outside, and he went down a couple times. That's the only place where I'm going to go. Both teams had to play on the same lousy field, and both were negatively affected. Maybe the Eagles slightly more just because.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jody.
Any other analytical stats? Sorry, I'm not buying.
There is a guy on Twitter. These guys are amazing. I don't know what they do all day, but he has a video and he highlights the players. He literally highlights the player that you could watch slip. I mean, Josh Sweat must have ran circles around Orlando Brown 4 or 5 times, and his feet just go flying out from under him. Even Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson is blocking his guy, and his 2 feet zip right out from under him, like lineman's feet. Isaiah Pacheco, let's turn it to the other side. Pacheco's running up the middle. He's got a huge hole, slips, falls, frights down. Same with McKinnon, had a huge hole, and he slips forward. I mean, it was defecting both teams, but I think the difference for the Eagles is they predicate on getting pass rush from their outside speed rushers. Kansas City is more getting pocket pressure up the middle where they don't have that burst and that speed that the Eagles are using. That's probably why the Eagles were slipping more, but that's a big part of their defense. They sacked the quarterback 70-plus times this year, and they got Zippo. They only pressured him 11 times in the game. I think that has to have a correlation.
Well, and Patrick Mahomes is getting out the ball really, really quickly. 2.2 seconds in the second half, another analytical stat. So the Eagles, Chiefs, no surprise. I mean, Andy Reid was well aware, and he put together a game plan where the ball was coming out early. But that's another thing. Patrick Mahomes, longest pass play of the game, 22 yards. If I told you all these things, you'd say, oh, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. And yet the narrative is the defense was terrible because they were terrible in the second half. They did not get a stop. It's interesting how one sort of the inability to make that one play in the second half essentially cost you the game, because all you would have to do is stop one of those drives, and they couldn't do it. It's as simple as that sometimes.
Well, and if you guys remember the last time I was on with you, I think it was the last time, I had brought up the stat that Mahomes has 40 touchdowns. 30 of them are 10 yards or less. This is what they kind of did because they don't have that big play guy. They don't have the guy that can go down the field. But the Eagles, like, their philosophy is you're not going to beat us down the field. So you had this kind of, weird, we don't want to go down the field. Well, we're not going to let you go down the field. And you end up having them do what they want to do, just nickel and dime their way down the field so that they get into the red zone where they feel most comfortable because they have the best player on the field at that time. So the Eagles' philosophy almost plays into what the Chiefs want to do. We don't want to take shots down the field, but we're very good at working our way down the field. And most teams are not good at working their way down the field. Why? They give up a sack. They fumble. They go off sides. They get a penalty. Something happens in the middle of that drive that impedes them and pushes them backwards, and then they have to settle for 3. Well, they're not getting 3. They're getting 7 because they are converting every time.
But I did see this stat last night, which I think lends itself to the misnomer that, they give up Tyreek Hill. They don't make big plays. The Kansas City Chiefs had more 25-yard plus plays than anybody in the National Football League this year. They might not have been touchdowns. They might have been setting up touchdowns, but it isn't like they are everything to the running back screen game, wide receiver screens. No. Mahomes still throws the ball downfield. A lot of times to Kelsey, but Juju Smith-Schuster, when he's not being held on Valentine's Day, only hold when it's important. They did make a lot of plays downfield this year. They led the league in 25-yard plays, so it wasn't.
Well, I think a lot of those big plays down the field, 25, is because Kelsey catches the ball in space, and he's so good after the run. He'll catch the ball at like 17 yards and end up getting an extra 8 yards after the catch because, let's be honest, that guy, how do you always get so open? It's Andy Reid, baby. He's always open. Kelsey's always open. Not to mention, you see what happens. The Eagles cover. They get some pressure. Mahomes steps right through it and runs for 26 yards. So that was a huge play in the game. The fact that he was able to step
by
through
the way, that play, I was just looking it up because you guys brought up explosive plays. The Eagles had the 3 longest plays in the game. 45-yard touchdown to AJ, 45-yard pass to Devonta Smith that set up what was essentially the tying touchdown. 28-yard Jalen Hurts scramble. The longest play of the game for Kansas City was that 26-yarder you were just talking about, Mike. 24-yard Pacheco run was number 2. 22-yard Patrick Mahomes pass over the middle to Kelsey, and it was a short pass, as you mentioned, and most of it was Travis Kelsey. Everything statistically, and this is why football is not a statistical game. Everything statistically pointed toward Eagles winning that football game. They didn't win the game because they didn't make the big plays. Kansas City made the big plays. Kansas City deserves credit for it, but I do think people are overstating how poorly the Eagles played. I think they outplayed Kansas City. I said it. That was my thought at the end of the game. I went to Pro Football Focus. Sure enough, they said they had better film grades than Kansas City. The difference between Philadelphia winning, as they did mainly this season, and losing was the inability to make the big play defensively.
Well, that John, and the same thing. What they don't do, they fumbled, which turned into 7. We talked about it a lot because there wasn't a lot to talk about, and it didn't hurt them. But their special teams, that punt return and the punt, that punt goes to the wrong direction. Yep. The Gunners are thinking the ball's going to the left. The punt shanks to the right. The wall's now set, and they take that down to the 5-yard line. Should Sipos have even been kicking in that game? He hadn't kicked a football since the Chicago game. You put him in the Super Bowl.
Fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah.
He shanks one. And I think another play in the game.
Giants game.
Yeah.
Giants
game. Sorry.
December 11th. Yeah.
So before the Bear game, the Bear game was on the
correct.
18th. That's when Hurts got hurt in the Bears game. I apologize.
Yeah.
The other play of the game that kills me, guys, 2nd and 11. They're going to get a delay of the game, and they end up calling timeout. They burn a timeout for no reason. I hate that. The timeout is more important than 5 yards. They end up kicking a field goal
Not
anyway.
if you're Kyle Shanahan.
Right. They end up kicking a field goal anyway from 33 yards out. If you just take the 5-yard loss, the worst case scenario is you're kicking a 38-yard field goal. And the play out of the timeout, it's like an NBA team taking a timeout and then turning the ball over. The play out of the timeout, they get a 5-yard pass the game out. Now, I don't know that that's what they wanted, but that's what they got. They played essentially to kick a field goal. And A.J. Brown said it yesterday. He thought the game changed when they settled for a field goal there.
Yep,
There's no need for them to call timeout. You take the 5-yard loss and you run a play from 2nd down and 15 instead or 16 instead of 2nd and 11. And then when the game was late, guys, what were they missing in the end because of a slide and then a kneel down? Oh, a timeout would have helped in that situation.
Yeah.
All right, Mike Gill, I want to run 2 names by you and ask you, did they seal their fate as Philadelphia Eagles going forward because of lackluster or a major mistake in the Super Bowl? Miles Sanders, bad first play, hurts his hand, overall bad game, Eagles and how they evaluate running backs. Good luck, Miles. And maybe Isaac Seumalo, because we were just talking about key games and A.J. Brown and what he said. I go back to that Isaac Seumalo penalty on a 3rd and 1 where they're guaranteed to get a first down because they got Jalen Hurts on a quarterback sneak is the percentage-wise best weapon in the NFL. Ooh, now it's 3rd and 6. Ooh, now Jalen is trying to scramble and make a play, and he drops the ball going hand-to-hand, and here we go in the other direction. Isaac and Miles both had tough Super Bowl days.
Can I throw in real quick, Jody, Quez Watkins, because him not making that catch down the field.
You think they'll cut Quez? He's got a year to go on his contract.
I don't think they'll cut him because he doesn't make any money.
That was the point I made. Will they not be back in an Eagle uniform?
Need
Quez will.
They need an upgrade there. They need an upgrade there.
They need an upgrade, though. That's why.
Miles Sanders is gone.
There.
I think we started to see the Gainwell transition even in these playoffs that while they had leads, I think they saw that he could handle it. And I think you'll see Sanders move on because someone's going to pay him. He's the 5th leading rusher in the league. The Eagles are not going to pay a running back. We all know that. They have Gainwell. They probably bring back Boston Scott at a lower at a low number and probably draft a guy in the 5th or 6th round. So I don't think you'll see Sanders back, not necessarily tied to his performance in this game, just because of business. Same with Seumalo. I just think business-wise, I just saw McShay's mock draft. Not that these things are gospel, but you're almost like they're going to draft a lineman in the 1st round. Well, they'd have him taking the kid from Oklahoma who plays tackle, but they said can play some guard for the couple of years until Lane Johnson leaves. And you can play him at guard for, so this is what the Eagles do. I mean, they draft on the lines. They feel comfortable that they scout that position well. Seumalo is going to get, I would imagine he'll be the big V of this offseason. He'll get somebody that you're like, whoa, what were you thinking there? No, he had a very good year, but that offsides he had, don't forget about that. It's 3rd and 1. They're in the rugby scrum. They're getting that first down, and he goes offsides the next play they fumble. So that offsides.
That was a bad play. There, no question. But Isaac is a good player. I don't like I like the Bytide comparison because he's going to get paid. Bytide was younger, but he's a much better player than Holloway.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that he's going to not come back because of his performance in this particular game. I think Seumalo is just another business philosophy decision, philosophical of we'll find a guard, we can coach a guy up. He might not be as good.
Might be Cam Jurgens. If Jason Kelsey comes back.
Could be Cam Jurgens. I guess you could think about Driscoll in that spot. But, I don't think either one of those guys. Now, Watkins on the 3rd receiver, I wouldn't be surprised if they target to try to get an upgrade in that spot, whether he's back or not. I guess he has a contract. He could be the 4th guy.
He'll be back. Yeah,
he's got to catch that ball, by the way.
Questions,
he's got to catch that ball.
Oh, yeah. That was huge play in the game. And that
Huge.
ball was right on target. Another great throw by Jalen Hurts in that.
The guy
game.
jumps. He doesn't need to jump for that ball.
Just
The
run
ball's
through it,
right
yeah.
in your hands, and he's leaping for it, and it made him almost go past the ball.
Yeah. All right. Enough of this spilt milk, Mike. It's time to turn the page. The Eagles lost both of their coordinators. Which is the bigger hit? Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen.
I would imagine the popular answer would be the bigger hit is Steichen, but for me, it's probably Gannon, and the reason would be Steichen, and I think they have in-house candidates that Jalen Hurts feels comfortable with, who have been around him for long enough to keep that synergy going. Brian Johnson's been here for the 2 years. Petula might go with Gannon out to Arizona if he gets a coordinator job, I would imagine, but they have some synergy on the offensive side of the ball, not to mention they have almost every guy on offense coming back. The new coordinator, whoever that may be, is going to be dealing with a completely reshuffled deck now, you would imagine. I mean, he's going to have a lot of different looks on this defense. And for all that Gannon was this and that, they had the number one pass defense in the league. They were the top team in yards against or the second team by a yard. They had 70-plus sacks. They had more turnovers than just about every team in the league. Numerically speaking, over 17 games, they were – I said, if you did not like the Eagles' defense, tell me a defense in this league that you did like. I would be hard-pressed to find one that you were like, man, that defense was really good.
Let me throw
Wink
this.
Martindale with the Giants. That's what Eagle fans want.
Yeah.
Let's.
But
By the way, know that under today's football rules, Gannon's defense is excellent, and you're going to have somebody come in and either. Now, I said you might have hated Gannon, and they might promote Denard Wilson, and you're going to get the same style of defense most likely, or they're going to bring somebody in here who keeps those principles based on the personnel that they have. So I think losing Gannon hurts more because you're probably going to try to get somebody who's going to run his style of defense.
Yeah.
Right,
can I throw something before you go, Jody?
Right.
I want to throw this at both of you guys because this is another one that drives me insane. The thought process that the Eagles play bad against good quarterbacks. What kind of analysis is that? Isn't that common sense? Patrick Mahomes threw for 5,200 yards before he ever played the Eagles. Evidently, other teams are struggling against the best quarterback in football. Obviously, it's easier to play bad quarterbacks.
I break it down like this. The 49ers had the best rush defense in the league. And I think I talked about this on your show. They're the best rush defense in the league. They got the best rush defense in the league while the 17 games that they played, which did not include a team that can run the ball down their throat like the Philadelphia Eagles. If you play the Eagles a handful of times, you're not going to be the best rush defense in the league. You can only play Patrick Mahomes once. That game there, you don't get opportunities to practice and see that level of quarterback all the time. So you are most likely going to struggle against that quarterback when you don't get to play that level of quarterback every single week. You know, it's like they were talking about in the Super Bowl. What makes the Eagles so difficult? Well, when you try to have the scout team run their RPO, they can't do it as well as the Eagles. So when they see the Eagles, they're like, geez, this is a lot faster than we saw it in practice. Well, when you get ready for Patrick Mahomes, you don't see a quarterback all season long that is that good. So how can you prepare for a guy when you never see that guy? So when you play that guy, you are most likely going to have a tough day at the office. And that's why the great players are great, because there's so few of them and there's so few chances to practice against them, because you only get to practice against them when you play them in a real game.
The reason why I'll actually accept that for criticism is Kansas City didn't go undefeated. They did lose 3 times. So 3 teams figured out how to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Eagles didn't. So it's overly simplistic to say, oh, the Eagles can't play. Eagles struggle against good quarterback. Yeah, so does everybody else struggling against Patrick Mahomes.
That's my point.
Three teams found a way to beat them. And
I
Eagles
agree.
did.
Yeah,
And
Well, and these guys aren't perfect. They're not perfect. They're not great every single week, but they're and by the way, a lot of times when they lose, Mahomes is still great. They lose for other. It is a team game.
They beat other parts of the team. They beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I don't know. I don't have the numbers up for Patrick Mahomes in those 3 losses, but I guarantee you one of them was good at the bare minimum, probably more than one from his standpoint, and they beat other aspects of the team.
Here's the one that hurts. Frank Reich beat him this year. Ouch! That's.
He also lost.
Getting very specific, and we're threading a needle to say the Colts, but they did. The Colts.
He lost to Joe Burrow and Josh Allen as well. Were his other 2 losses.
And I'm guaranteeing, not even looking at, I'm guaranteeing his numbers were pretty good in a couple of those losses.
Well, Indy actually held him to 17 points. That's why I'm bringing up.
Well, and listen, we go back to and so we mentioned the Eagles defense. John Gannon, for whatever reason, played more man coverage, 60%. Why? What was going on? And they blitzed the 4th most in this game than they blitzed all year long. They were trying different things to go after this guy. It just wasn't working.
It was a blitz on the Sky Moore touchdown. That's why he was so wide open. You couldn't even figure out if you're watching it on TV, Mike Gill. I wanted to say who missed the coverage. You couldn't figure it out because there was no one in the picture. There wasn't even a D-back that could make the camera shot.
But he's got it, guys. He's got to make adjustments. He doesn't make adjustments.
All right, let me run this by you, Mike Gill. We're running late, both you guys. And I'd love to take credit for it, but it wasn't my idea. It was Matt Verderam with me last night on WIP. Offensive coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals, Eric Bieniemy, leaves Kansas City, leaves Andy Reid. They told him he could leave. They didn't re-up him immediately last year. They said, go out and see if you find something. If not, come back, be our offensive coordinator again, which he did. He hasn't gotten a head coaching gig, which some people think that he should have by now. Does he go elsewhere? Would he be a perfect fit with Arizona? Because Gannon needs a no-nonsense, take charge kind of guy over Kyler Murray. One of the very few Kyler Murray has to at least give credence to is Eric Bieniemy. He's got rings he can flash in his face. Eric Bieniemy, Gannon's offensive coordinator in Arizona. What do you think?
Hey, listen, if anybody can grab Eric Bieniemy to be their offensive coordinator, especially at this stage of the offseason, I think that would be a huge coup. I'm looking at what's going on in Washington. Apparently, they wanted to talk with them. They talked with our local guy here.
He is interviewing with Washington.
Yes, Washington and Greg Roman, a local guy down here, interviewed with Washington yesterday. But if you can get Eric Bieniemy in Washington in this division, I think the Eagles are going to be up against a Washington team that's going to start to turn the page. And then that would set up the possibility that if Ron Rivera gets off to a slow start, that, he gets elevated to a head coaching role. But look, a lot of times, and this is interesting, Jody, why does John Gannon get a head coaching job? He just got ripped in the Super Bowl. You don't get not hired based on one game. Your resume matters. When you have a bad day at work, you don't get fired. They say, man, this guy's a great producer. He just had a bad week. He's not bringing in the same sales because maybe his whatever. John Gannon must have gone in there and told them, my staff can look like this. You get hired because of what your staff can look like. So if he had some connection to say, hey, I can get Eric Bieniemy to come here, that's a huge move for Gannon. But I would be more concerned if I'm an Eagles fan if Washington can get Bieniemy to go there.
Yeah,
right. Because if you're going to Arizona, the pipeline to become the head coach there is a lot. That's that's an avenue that's almost shut off. If you go to Washington, there's an avenue that you could become their head coach, right?
Yeah.
Because of now, of course, if you get off to a bad start, it could be because of your offense, but that would be probably unlikely.
Drew Petzing, remember that name, or Nick Caley, remember those names. Nobody heard of them. It's probably going to be Jonathan Gannon's offensive coordinator. We'll see how it works out. It's not going to be sexy, but it might work out.
Mikey G, we appreciate whenever you do jump on board with us. Thanks for doing it today. You know, we're going to hit you up every single Wednesday during the off season as well. We'll talk to you next week, big guy.
All right, boys. Take care.
Thanks, Mike.
Gill,
At Mike Gill Show, 3 to 7, 2 to 6. What is it, Mike? I screwed it up. I'm thinking of our
Sports
show.
Bash on 97.3 ESPN. You can find it today. And chances are McMullen will be on it later. If not, it'll be tomorrow.
I think
or the
it's
day after.
2 to 6. 2 to 6. There, corrected myself.
All right, quickie timeout. We got to come back, put a bow on the show. We're running late.